You know, I've spent most of my life watching money, how it moves, where it goes, what makes it valuable, what destroys that value. And there's something happening right now that most people don't understand. Something that's affecting every dollar in your wallet, every penny in your savings account. But almost nobody is talking about it honestly. The Federal Reserve, the most powerful financial institution in the world, has created more money in the last 5 years than existed in the entire US economy just 15 years ago. Let me say that again because it sounds impossible. More money created in 5 years than existed in the entire economy 15 years ago. We're talking about $8 trillion. That's trillion with a T. That's $8,000 billion. That's 8,000 millions. It's a number so large it stops making sense to most people. But here's what makes sense. That money didn't come from anywhere. It was created out of thin air. And when you create that much money that fast, there are consequences. Real consequences. Consequences that are showing up in your grocery bill, your rent, your ability to retire, your kids' future. Today, I want to walk you through what actually happened, how it happened, why it happened, and most importantly, what it means for you. Because this isn't just some abstract economic policy. This is about the value of your labor, your savings, your future. And I think when you understand it clearly, you'll see why I'm concerned. Not panicked, not doom and gloom, but genuinely concerned about where this leads if we don't change course.
Most people have heard of the Federal Reserve. They know it's important. They know it has something to do with interest rates and inflation. Maybe they've heard of Jerome Powell, the current chairman. But very few people actually understand what the Fed does or how much power it has. Let me give you the simple version first, the story most people believe. The Federal Reserve is America's central bank. It was created in 1913 to provide stability to the financial system, to prevent the kind of banking panics and crashes that used to plague the economy. And for most of its history, it operated relatively quietly, adjusting interest rates up and down to try to keep the economy growing without overheating, trying to maintain stable prices, trying to keep unemployment low. That's the traditional understanding. The Fed as a technocratic institution, run by smart economists, making careful adjustments to keep things balanced. Nothing too dramatic, nothing too risky. And for decades, that's more or less how it worked. The Fed's balance sheet, the total amount of assets it held, stayed relatively small and stable. In the year 2000, it was around $600 billion. By 2008, just before the financial crisis, it was still only about $900 billion. Gradual growth over decades, nothing shocking. Then 2008 happened, the financial crisis. Lehman Brothers collapsed. The entire global financial system teetered on the edge of complete meltdown. And the Fed did something it had never done before, not at this scale. It started buying massive amounts of assets, treasury bonds, mortgage-backed securities, pumping money into the financial system to prevent a complete collapse. This was called quantitative easing, QE, and at the time, it was controversial. Critics warned about inflation, about moral hazard, about bailing out the banks that caused the crisis. But defenders said it was necessary, that we were facing another Great Depression, that extraordinary times required extraordinary measures. By 2014, after several rounds of QE, the Fed's balance sheet had grown to $4.5 trillion. That's 5 times larger than it had been just 6 years earlier. 5 times in 6 years. That was unprecedented, shocking even. Many economists thought we'd inflated a massive bubble, that disaster was inevitable. But something strange happened. The predicted inflation didn't arrive. Not immediately. Prices stayed relatively stable. The economy slowly recovered. Unemployment fell. And so a new narrative developed. Maybe QE worked. Maybe the Fed had discovered a new tool. Maybe we didn't have to worry so much about printing money after all. That's where most people's understanding stops. The Fed did QE after 2008, it seemed to work, and now we're back to normal. But that's not the whole story, not even close.
Here's what actually happened. the part that doesn't get explained clearly on the evening news. After the 2008 crisis, the Fed slowly tried to reduce its balance sheet, to unwind some of the QE, to get back to something more normal. By 2019, they'd gotten it down to about $3.8 trillion. Still historically massive, but at least moving in the right direction. Then March 2020 hit. COVID, pandemic, economic shutdown. And the Fed didn't just respond, it went absolutely nuclear. In a matter of weeks, the Fed added more to its balance sheet than it had in the entire aftermath of 2008. And it kept going. By April 2022, the Fed's balance sheet had reached $9 trillion. Let me give you some perspective on that number. In 2008, the total value of all U.S. currency in circulation, all the physical dollars that existed anywhere in the world, was about $800 billion. Today, it's over $2.3 trillion. That's a tripling in 15 years. But even that doesn't capture the full picture, because most money isn't physical anymore. It's digital, numbers in computer systems at banks. The broader money supply, what economists call M2, which includes not just cash, but checking accounts, savings accounts, money market funds, all the money that people can easily spend, that was about $8 trillion in 2008. By early 2022, it had reached $22 trillion. The money supply had nearly tripled in 14 years. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but the economy grew too, right? There are more people, more businesses, more economic activity. Don't we need more money for that? Fair question. And yes, the economy did grow. But here's the thing. Real GDP, the actual production of goods and services adjusted for inflation, only grew by about 40% over that same period. Meanwhile, the money supply grew by 175%. That's not matching economic growth. That's flooding the system with far more money than the real economy can absorb. How does this actually work? How does the Fed create money? It's surprisingly simple, and that simplicity is part of what makes it so powerful and so concerning. The Fed doesn't print physical cash. Well, it does, but that's a tiny fraction. What it does is buy assets, usually government bonds or mortgage-backed securities, from banks and other financial institutions, and it pays for those assets by creating new money electronically, just adding numbers to the seller's account. There's no vault somewhere with gold backing this up. There's no savings account the Fed is drawing from. It's literally just created, conjured into existence with a keyboard and a computer system. The Fed buys $1 billion of Treasury bonds, and boom, $1 billion new dollars exist that didn't exist a moment before. Now, in normal times, in small amounts, this isn't a problem. This is how central banks have operated for decades. The issue is scale. When you're creating trillions of dollars, when you're more than doubling the money supply in just over a decade, the laws of supply and demand start to apply, even to money itself. Think about it this way. If you have 1,000 apples in a market, and everyone wants apples, those apples are valuable. But if someone suddenly dumps 10,000 more apples into that same market overnight, what happens to the price? It falls. Each individual apple becomes less valuable because there are so many more of them. Money works the same way. When you massively increase the supply of money without a corresponding increase in real goods and services, each dollar becomes worth less. Not worthless, worth less. It buys less than it used to. That's inflation, and that's exactly what we've been experiencing. From 2020 to 2023, inflation in the U.S. reached levels we hadn't seen in 40 years. At its peak in 2022, the Consumer Price Index was rising at over 9% annually. 9%. Food prices were up more than that. Energy prices were up even more. Housing costs were skyrocketing. Now, the Fed and many economists will tell you that inflation was caused by supply chain disruptions from COVID, by the war in Ukraine, by all kinds of external factors. And there's truth to that. Those things contributed. But you can't create $5 trillion in new money in 2 years and then act surprised when prices go up. The money supply matters. Basic economics tells us that. Here's where it gets even more concerning. Who benefited from all this money creation? You might think, well, if the government is creating all this money, surely it's going to regular people, to small businesses, to those who need it most. But that's not how it works, not primarily. The Fed doesn't send checks directly to citizens. It buys assets from financial institutions. So the newly created money flows first to banks, to hedge funds, to large investors, to those who own significant amounts of bonds and securities. And that's exactly what happened. While Main Street was struggling through lockdowns and economic uncertainty, Wall Street had one of the biggest booms in history. The stock market soared to record highs. Real estate prices went through the roof. Billionaires added hundreds of billions of dollars to their wealth. From March 2020 to the end of 2021, U.S. billionaires' wealth increased by over $2 trillion. $2 trillion in less than 2 years. Meanwhile, regular workers saw their real wages, adjusted for inflation, stagnate or decline. The wealth gap, already historically wide, grew even wider. This isn't a conspiracy. This isn't some evil plan. It's just how the system is designed. When you inject massive amounts of money into the financial system, that money flows first to those who are already connected to the financial system, who already own assets, who already have wealth. It doesn't flow equally to everyone. Let me give you a concrete example. If you owned a home in 2020 and you had investments in a 401k or stocks, the past few years were probably pretty good for you on paper. Your home value likely went up 30, 40, maybe 50%. Your stock portfolio probably did well. You might feel wealthier. But if you didn't own a home, if you were renting and trying to save up for a down payment, what happened? The house you were trying to buy became 40% more expensive. The rent you were paying went up 20, 30%. The money you had saved lost purchasing power to inflation. You didn't get wealthier. You fell further behind. That's the hidden effect of this monetary policy. It rewards those who already have assets. It punishes savers. It makes it harder for young people, for working people, for anyone trying to build wealth from scratch. And here's the really troubling part. Once you've created all this money, once you've inflated all these asset prices, you can't just undo it easily. If the Fed tries to reduce its balance sheet quickly, if it tries to remove money from the system, asset prices could crash, the stock market could collapse, real estate could crater, we could face a severe recession, or worse. So they're trapped. They created too much money, caused inflation and asset bubbles, and now they can't easily fix it without causing a different kind of crisis. It's like they've backed themselves into a corner, and all the options from here are painful.
So what does all this mean for you? For your savings, your wages, your future, your kids' future? First, understand that your money is losing value every single day. Even with inflation cooling from its peak, it's still running above the Fed's 2% target. And that 2% target means they're explicitly trying to reduce your purchasing power by 2% every year. That's the goal. Not zero inflation, not protecting the value of your savings, but slowly, steadily devaluing your money year after year. Over 20 years at 2% inflation, your money loses about a third of its value. Over 40 years, it loses more than half. That retirement savings you've been building, it'll buy a lot less by the time you're ready to use it. Second, wage growth can't keep up. Your employer might give you a 3% raise and call it generous, but if inflation is running at 4 or 5%, you're actually taking a pay cut in real terms. You're working just as hard, producing just as much value, but your standard of living is declining. This has been happening for decades, but it accelerated dramatically over the past few years. Real median wages, adjusted for inflation, have barely grown since the 1970s. Meanwhile, productivity has skyrocketed. Worker output per hour has more than doubled. So why haven't wages kept pace? One big reason is monetary inflation constantly eroding the value of those wages. Third, this system makes it nearly impossible to save your way to financial security using traditional means. Remember when you could put money in a savings account and earn meaningful interest? When savings bonds were actually a viable investment? Those days are gone. For over a decade, the Fed kept interest rates near zero. Even now, with rates higher, savings account interest barely keeps pace with inflation, if at all. You can't save your way to wealth anymore. You have to invest, to take risks, to put your money into stocks or real estate or other assets that might go up but might also crash. Savers are punished, speculators are rewarded. Fourth, this system is creating massive intergenerational inequality. Older generations who bought homes and built investments when things were more affordable, they're largely fine. Their assets have appreciated. They've benefited from the money printing even if they don't realize it. But younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, they're facing an economy where housing costs have exploded, where entry-level wages haven't kept pace, where student debt is crushing, where the traditional path to building wealth seems out of reach. The American dream, the idea that if you work hard and save responsibly, you can build a good life, that's becoming harder to believe in. And this isn't just an American problem. Central banks around the world have followed similar policies. The European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, they've all engaged in massive money creation. It's a global phenomenon, and it's creating instability, wealth inequality, and political tension everywhere it happens. From an investor's perspective, and I've been investing for decades, this environment is treacherous. Traditional valuation metrics don't work anymore. Companies with no profits traded billions in value. Real estate prices have detached from fundamental economics. Everything feels overpriced because there's so much money chasing limited real assets. But what's the alternative? Hold cash and watch it lose value to inflation? That's guaranteed loss. So you're forced to take risk, to invest in markets you know are overvalued, to play a game where the rules keep changing and the house has an unlimited money printer. Now I want to be clear. I'm not saying the Fed is evil. I'm not saying the economists and policymakers making these decisions are deliberately trying to harm people. Many of them genuinely believe they're doing the right thing, that they're preventing worse outcomes, that they're managing impossible situations as best they can. But good intentions don't change economic reality. You can't create infinite money without consequences. You can't distort markets for years and expect everything to just work out fine. And you can't keep pretending that these policies don't have massive distributional effects, that they don't reward some people while harming others. The promise of central banking was supposed to be stability, to smooth out economic cycles, to prevent the extreme booms and busts of earlier eras. But what we've created instead is a system of constant intervention, where markets can't function naturally, where price signals are distorted, where risk isn't properly priced because everyone knows the Fed will step in to prevent major failures. It's a system that privatizes gains and socializes losses. When things go well, the profits go to investors and executives. When things go badly, the Fed prints money to bail out the system, and the cost is distributed to everyone through inflation.
So what do we do about this? Because understanding the problem is only valuable if it leads to action. First, on a personal level, you need to protect yourself. And I'm not a financial advisor, this isn't financial advice, but I can share what makes sense from an economic perspective. Don't keep large amounts of money in cash or low-interest savings if you can avoid it. Cash is a melting ice cube in an inflationary environment. You want to own real assets that can maintain value. That might be stocks in solid companies that have pricing power. It might be real estate if you can afford it. It might be skills and education that make you more valuable in the job market. But you cannot simply save in dollars and expect to maintain purchasing power. Second, be skeptical of debt, especially high-interest debt. While inflation can erode the real value of fixed-rate debt, which is one reason the government doesn't mind high inflation when it has massive debts. Consumer debt at 20 or 25% interest rates will destroy your finances no matter what happens with inflation. Avoid it. Third, invest in yourself. Your skills, your knowledge, your ability to create value, those can't be inflated away. In an uncertain economic environment, being adaptable and valuable is your best protection. But personal action isn't enough. This is fundamentally a systemic problem that requires systemic solutions. We need to demand transparency and accountability from the Federal Reserve. Right now, the Fed operates with enormous independence, making decisions that affect hundreds of millions of people with limited democratic oversight. They're not elected. They're not directly accountable to voters. And while some independence is important to prevent short-term political manipulation, the current level of unchecked power is troubling. Congress has the authority to change how the Fed operates, to impose stricter rules about money creation, to require more transparency about who benefits from monetary policy. But Congress has largely abdicated that responsibility, finding it easier to let the Fed handle difficult economic decisions than to make tough legislative choices themselves. We need to support politicians who understand these issues, who are willing to ask hard questions about monetary policy, who will demand accountability. That means paying attention to who's on the banking committees, who's asking tough questions in Fed hearings, who's proposing actual reforms rather than just accepting the status quo. We need to educate others. Most people don't understand this stuff because it's deliberately made complicated. Central bankers speak in technical jargon. Economic policy is presented as too complex for regular people to have opinions about. But it's not. The basics of monetary policy, the effects of printing too much money, the consequences of inflation, these aren't rocket science, they're understandable. And when more people understand them, they'll demand better policies. Support organizations working on monetary reform. There are think tanks, advocacy groups, researchers doing serious work on these issues. They need public support to counter the influence of those who benefit from the current system. Most importantly, don't become cynical. Don't throw up your hands and say there's nothing to be done. Throughout history, when enough people demanded change, when they understood what was at stake and organized effectively, systems have been reformed. The Federal Reserve itself was created by legislation in 1913. It can be reformed by legislation today. The rules governing monetary policy aren't laws of nature, they're human choices. And human choices can be changed when enough people insist on it. This isn't about left or right politics. This isn't about Democrat or Republican. This is about whether we want a monetary system that serves the broad public interest or one that primarily benefits those already wealthy and connected. That's a question that should transcend partisan divide.
You know, I started this by saying I've spent my life watching money. And one thing I've learned is that money ultimately is just a tool. It's a way to facilitate exchange, to store value, to coordinate economic activity. It's not magical. It's not even that complicated. But when you abuse that tool, when you create too much of it too fast, when you use it to benefit some at the expense of others, it stops working properly. It creates distortions, inequalities, instabilities. And eventually, those chickens come home to roost. We're living through one of the great monetary experiments in history. The scale of money creation we've seen over the past 15 years is unprecedented in peacetime, and we don't know for certain how it ends. Maybe it works out okay, maybe we muddle through, or maybe we're building toward a crisis that will make 2008 look manageable. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I can tell you that understanding what's happening, protecting yourself, demanding better policies, these things matter. They matter for you. They matter for your kids. They matter for whether we can build an economy that actually works for regular people rather than just for those at the top. So stay informed, stay engaged. Don't let them tell you this is too complicated for you to understand or too important for you to have a say in. It's your money, it's your economy, it's your future. And we can do better. We've done better before. We can do it again. Thanks for watching. If this helped you understand something important, share it with someone who needs to see it. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.